Welcome to the Anime Audiophile Podcast. Please like and subscribe for more. Thank you. Konoha Hiden, the perfect day for a wedding. Chapter 8. The final mission, and now then, it's finally time to get started. It's teammates' last mission. Let's go, you guys. Kiba loudly raised his voice like he was yelling out a battle cry. After a long journey, Shino, Kiba, and Akamaru had finally arrived at the entrance of Saraku. They passed under a stylish Japanese gate held up by thick, scarlet pillars and walked into the town. In the next moment, every single one of the party gulped at what they saw spread out in front of them. Even Kiba, who had been incredibly boisterous just a minute ago, looked meek all of a sudden. It was beyond what they had imagined. Countless buildings were huddled together, walls that had broken apart and crumbled, slanted store signs with faded paint, and numerous shops with broken glass windows, lined up like they were trying to compete with each other. Of course, there was no one inside the town. The uninhabited and abandoned ruins had obviously stayed that way for a very long time. The center of the city had a lot of tall buildings around, a telling sign of how a considerable number of people used to live here. Neither Kiba nor Shino knew how Saraku had gotten into this state or where its former residents had gone. But before they realized what they were doing, they were imagining the long-past scenes of bustling activity that could no longer be seen. Parents and children had been here. Siblings. Friends. Lovers. There was no doubt that there used to be happenings here that were no different from those of Konoha's. The entire neighborhood was quiet. There wasn't a single sound. But, occasionally, you could hear the sound of the wind. It was most likely the sound of wind currents blowing through the broken windows and inside the buildings. It felt like the wind that blowed so vainly in the quiet stillness was the sound made by the abandoned town screaming. The vicissitudes of life. That phrase came to Shino's mind. But then, was it really acceptable to sum up something like this with that one simple phrase? He hesitated, because the sight looked too sad for those words. It's a desolate place. Shino murmured. Do any people really live here? Kiba's nose twitched, moving. There's no mistake, he said. There are definitely a few people here, somehow. Kiba walked into the building that stood at the front, saying, "This way." Shino and Akamaru followed. The inside of the building was just as jumbled as the outside. The two men and animal carefully made their way down a long and dark corridor. It got more and more complicated as they headed in, like a maze. Pipes of some kind clung to the walls, though it was hard to tell whether they carried water or gas. Judging from the appearance, it looked like the building hadn't originally been structured like this, but rather that several additions had been made to it over the years, and that had resulted in such strange pathways forming. It's most likely a countermeasure against intruders. Shino thought, staring at the differently colored walls. It stinks of mold in here, Kiba commented from ahead of him. This place sure is depressing. At that moment, Meow, I'm so sorry, it's depressing. A cat had sprung out from one of the broken air ventilator ducts. What the? Kiba was discomposed by the sudden appearance of the cat. It was because he hadn't been able to sense it with his nose. Akamaru went on guard, letting out a low growl. In an instant, Shino was on the alert as well. Those Hittite, meow, Konoha shinobi? The cat was talking. It didn't look like there were any other cats around. It was mostly gray-furred, with white fur at the tip of its nose and mouth. It was glaring at them with sparking eyes. One sinks a dog. One stinks a bug. One is a dog. After looking them all over, one by one, the cat muttered such abusive language. Seriously, meow, you're such a bunch of good-for-nothings. But Kiba didn't mind that at all. He was looking at the cat and showering it with words of praise. This one's a surprise, Kiba said, completely without scent. This cat's a big deal. Ninja cats completely remove our scent when we're self-grooming our bodies, meow. We're different from normal cats. One of those rumors ninja cats, huh? Shino fixed his eyes on the cat in front of him. It looked like any other cat you'd find just about anywhere. Its movements were very cat-like as well. The difference was the kimono it wore and the human words it spoke. Suraku had another side to it, as a paradise for cats. Many cats had come to live in the abandoned town. Most of them were normal cats who couldn't speak the human language, but among them were these miraculous ninja cats who had learned how to speak like human and use ninjutsu. These ninja cats had served the Black Marketeer clan here for generations. Calling them a substantial authority in this town wouldn't be exaggerating. Ninja cats cooperated with normal cats so that be it day or night, they were always keeping a watchful eye on the town. And that included swiftly dealing with intruders. It looked like the pipes that clung to the walls and ceilings were actually a secret pathway for the cats. The whole building was probably the whole town was probably the same. They'd likely manufactured the whole area so that you wouldn't be able to go anywhere that was out of the reach of the cats. It was thanks to the ninja cats that this area remained secure. However, Shino and the others had only come desperately looking for honey wine. It would be terrible if there was a misunderstanding that they'd come with bad intentions. And so, Shino began to speak as gently as he could. "We are people to be suspicious of." Shino said, "We're looking for someone. We're just searching for information. A man who wears sunglasses, a long coat, and a hood that covers his eyes. You're most certainly suspicious, meow." "Well, you have a point." For some reason, Kiba agreed with the cat. Shino felt a little irritated by that, and raised his voice. "You can't call people suspicious just because they wear a hood and sunglasses. The reason being that I am not someone who's suspicious. And furthermore, people you should truly be suspicious of are the types who try to hide their suspicious nature by not looking suspicious at all and..." "Calm down, Shino," Kiba said. "It's not going to help if you raise your voice at the cat. I really can't bear how much you stink of dog, meow. It makes me want to throw up, excuse me. Hey, you cat bastard sitting over there. Calm down, Kiba. Remain calm. Follow my example. It'd be better if you quickly left, meow. If you don't, you'll be ripped limb from limb." Faced with the repeating provocations from the ninja cat, Kiba finally sapped. That's just fine with me. We can get our information just as well by tying you up, can't we?" Kiba glared at the cat with sharp eyes. He cracked his knuckles, then rolled his neck around, lightly loosening his body. "And then let's go, Akamaru." Kiba leapt up from the floor, and Akamaru rushed forwards at almost the exact same time. "You foolish human, meow." The cat looked up at the ceiling, not looking particularly concerned at all. It moved its back legs one by one to stretch them out, and rolled the joint of its own neck as well. "Gan!" Akamaru let out a high-pitched yelp, and collapsed next to Kiba. "What's wrong, Akamaru?" "Why, this is Dash." Kiba suddenly collapsed next to the writhing Akamaru as well. Why the Gahayaka Dash Akamaru and Kiba rolled around on the floor, letting out strange noises. They seemed to have completely lost themselves, pulling at their hair and hitting their clothes. Shino's skin perceived the tiny little attackers that had jumped off the ninja cat's body. "Oh, so they're fleas," he said. "You sent out fleas as an attack. As expected of one who carries the name of a ninja cat. This is really rare. I guess you could call summit like ninpu, flea shuriken, don't just see calmly analyze ye." Kiba yelled. "Quickly do something Snu." It couldn't be helped that one would feel incredibly itchy when they'd been covered by such a large number of fleas. Kiba's aggrieved yelling and Akamaru's pained whines were echoing in the corridor. In order to aid them, Shino kneeled down on one knee and made the signs for a hand seal. Insect gathering technique. Shino yelled and placed his hand down on the floor. As he did, a pattern of blue chakra shaped like a spider's web emerged. It spread out from his fingertips like a fan. As he did that, the fleas that had covered Kiba and Akamaru jumped towards the blue chakra webs, gathering inside them. The insect gathering technique worked just as its name suggested, luring out bugs near the user and gathering them in one place. It was a fundamental technique for the Aburame clan that every one of their members could do. On that note, this had originally been a technique used for collecting insects of investigating ecology. Where Savid, Kiba must have been in a lot of pain. He was trying to even out his disordered breathing as he got up. Akamaru looked like he still felt disgusted by the ordeal, shaking his whole body like he would when he'd gotten wet. To think you couldn't even win against fleas. There's a limit to how pathetic can be, you mutts, meow. You shitty cat, looking down on us. Kiba lunged towards the cat who had been calmly watching them. Gotcha. Kiba had firmly grabbed hold of the cat in his hands. However, the second he'd touched it, the cat's body crumpled into pieces like stone. What the? Pebbles? No, that wasn't what they were. They were crunchy bits of cat food. The cat had definitely been there a moment ago. When in the world had it switched itself with a fake made of cat feed? I see, so it's a cat feed bunch-in, Shino murmured. Is this really the time to be praising them? Kiba snapped. It's really about time you get going, meow. The cat spoke from a room inside the passage, its eyes shining in the dark. Even a cat will only turn the other cheek 3 times. From now on, it'll be time to bring out the claws, meow. It was like this that the ninja cats turned away intruders. For the sake of protecting the town and the Black Marketeer clan. However, it should be that if a merchant stops by, they don't turn them all away. That's what Shino thought. However, he didn't know what to do that would make the cat stop fending them off. Fuck this. Kiba howled irritably, we can't catch the cat, we can't get information from the cat, there's nothing we can do. If you want information, then you exchange it for Matatabi. But that's impossible, since you lot don't have any Matatabi. You understand now? You really stink of dog, so we really want you to hurry up and leave. So that was it. Matatabi could be traded for a pass to get inside. They'd been thoughtless. Their opponent was a cat after all. This is bad, Kiba, Shino said. At this rate, we'll make no progress. The reason is that we didn't bring even a little bit of Matatabi. Shino leaned in closer to Kiba, whispering so the ninja cat couldn't hear. Since the situation turned into this, I'll use my bugs to dash. Hold on, Shino. Leave this to me. Kiba took out a soldier pill from the pouch on his belt and tossed it towards the ninja cat. Alright, cat. I'll give you this. Let's make it a trade. For information on the beekeeper's location. Are you making a fool out of me? No matter how you look at it, this isn't Matatabi, meow. Matatabi is, the cat trailed off, stopping its curses about the soldier pill. It started to lick the soldier pill, its pink tongue flashing in and out. What? What is this? Does this have Matatabi in it? The cat slowly sank down to lie down on the floor. It was the typical lounging behavior shown in cats after they licked Matatabi. So, how's that? Kiba grinned widely. We can do business now, right? What's this about, Kiba? Shino asked. Do soldier pills have Matatabi in them? Nah, the soldier pill has Inakeka inside. It's something similar to Matatabi. The Inazuka clan's special-made soldier pills were usually aimed at dogs. He'd never have thought that one of those soldier pills could have things that cats like too. As expected, Kiba was a reliable man. Jianin, the cat, sounded vexed even in its soldier pill-induced days. To think that I'd curl down to the floor like this because of some dog-stinking jerk, meow. My pride can't forgive this, meow. The cat said that, swallowed the soldier pillow in one gulp, and took off running. Why? Don't you go stealing from me. You shitty cat. The cat dashed off like a hare, or maybe he should say, like a cat. Either way, Kiba had run after the runaway cat at full speed. Just you wait. Kiba's enraged shouts echoed furiously through the halls. Shino and Akamaru looked at the side of Kiba's back as he chased the ninja cat and started running too. As they chased the nimble ninja cat, they ran down countless twists and turns, corridors curving left and right like a maze. Shino had just turned after another curve in the path when he saw Kiba up ahead of him. He had frozen in place, completely stock still. Shino panically came to a halt in his running so he wouldn't run into him. What happened, Kiba? Did you lose sight of it? Kiba didn't turn his head even at. Wouldn't you be curious about what kind of a guy he is? Well, that certainly was what you would think. Normally. But this was Saraku. The possibility that whoever lived here wasn't someone upright was 200%. As long as that person did their business properly under the watch of the cats, then nobody would care whether they were a traveler or a fugitive. As you can tell by the traveler's guardian deities, these are sacred grounds. But the people who live in Saraku don't bother looking around. We have no business here after all, Tamaki said with a laugh. The fact that the beekeeper was living on sacred grounds didn't seem to be something upsetting. As expected, the people of Saraku have a unique way of thinking that's a little bit different than others. But we do have business here, you know, Kiba said. We can't just sit around in a daze for who knows how many days while waiting for our offerings to be exchanged with honey wine. Either way, you jerks won't be able to find it, meow. Even cats get lost in that bamboo grove, meow. Momo gave a sadistic laugh. He thought the cat had finally decided to say something worthwhile only for something like that to come out of its mouth. But Kiba wasn't perturbed. We're shinobi. We won't get lost. He directed the words at Momo, and then turned to walk towards the bamboo grove shrouded in mist. After parting with Tamaki and Momo, the party had started walking through the foggy bamboo grove. Shino turned his head and looked back. The rest of the town was already out of sight in the fog. So, that's what Momo meant by getting lost. If this was the state of the food, no wonder Tamaki and Momo and the other people of Saraku had never gone in here. Either way, since they were looking for someone whose face was unknown, it would be an impossible task to accomplish if you didn't have shinobi with high senses of perception like Kiba and Shino. This wasn't somewhere for non-shinobi like Tamaki to be. But, that being said, it was possible that this wasn't somewhere for shinobi to be either. Those statues of traveler guardian deities were placed as a marker to separate the world that humans lived in and the world that gods lived in. In other words, they were now walking on territory that didn't belong to humans, but gods. They already hadn't been able to see well in this fog, but Shino felt like it had gotten even thicker. Alright, this should be a good spot for the first one, Kiba said, and threw a kunai into a nearby bamboo pole. He was doing it for the sake of placing a marker near the entrance of the bamboo grove. He'd do it again after they covered a bit more distance. They'd repeat that for a while as they continued. This way, they'd be able to find their way out when they left without puzzling over it too much. First we'll find him with my nose, then when we do, you'll call your bugs and achoo. Kiba sneezed suddenly. He sniffled, and then said, maybe that girl's talking about me. Have you fallen for her? Shino bluntly asked. No, you idiot. There's absolutely nothing like that. Kiba was incredibly flustered. He was yelling his denials using a much louder voice than usual. Was I interrupting your romance? I'm telling you you're wrong. Hinata's getting married soon, Kiba. When you get married I'll end up finally being alone. When you do get married, leave Akamaru to me. The reason is that he is the only one who understands me without words. Excuse me? I've got no clue what you're saying. What do you mean you'll be alone? As Kiba was barking in a fluster, Akamaru looked up at his owner and barked too. Woof. What the Akamaru? Why were you saying stuff like that, too? And leave my goatee out of this. Even though Akamaru had only given one bark, it appeared he conveyed a long string of words. Kiba was ranting back, his face going crimson all the way to his ears. Was his face red because of anger or embarrassment? Shino silently thought. Most likely both. Kiba suddenly gave an exasperated shout. Ark, that's enough. Let's just keep going without getting into stupid conversations like this. He turned his back on them both, stomping ahead. Seriously, the strong smell of bamboo makes finding things hard, ugh. It looked like he was much more irritated now than he'd been a while ago. But Shino was pleased to see it, because Kiba was far easier to understand when he was like this. Of course, while he might have been pleased now, that was only now. When he first met Kiba, there had been many times when he'd gotten irritated at his personality that was the complete opposite of Shino's. During break time at the academy, Shino would let his bugs take walks on the top of his desk, while Kiba would run around the corridors and playgrounds with other classmates, yelling loudly. In class, Shino would silently listen to the teacher, while Kiba would either be asleep or making a racket. To sum it up, Kiba was second to Naruto when it came to, forget second. After all, the boy in question had never been the type to be content if he wasn't first place. Kiba was at Naruto's level when it came to causing a ruckus. He had been a complete problem child. Back then, Shino had wanted to be assigned to a team with anyone but him. But now, Shino went on missions with that same problem child. When had being alongside Kiba become something completely natural? Life was really impossible to understand. For some reason, Shino kept thinking of the old days as he walked. His field of vision was still hindered by the fog. The scenery never seemed to change, always the same. Clusters of bamboo with thick fog hanging between them. Shino thought his surroundings right now looked like a painting. Hold on a minute. This is strange, Kiba suddenly muttered in a low voice. This isn't the smell of bamboo. What is this faint, sweet scent? Kiba looked around, his nose twitching. Of course, Shino had no way of smelling whatever Kiba could. It was that faint of a scent. However, Shino did immediately notice the very strange thing right in front of his eyes. Kiba, look at this. Ahead of where Shino was pointing, there was a pole of bamboo, with a kunai sticking out of it. It was the kunai that Kiba had thrown in as a marker near the town outskirts from where they'd entered. A long time had passed since they placed that marker, and they continued walking forwards only. They shouldn't be seeing the marker. Is it a jinjutsu? While feeling uneasy, Shino shifted the chakra flow inside his body, making the insects inside him uncomfortable. He'd shifted his chakra for the sake of breaking the jinjutsu. However, absolutely nothing changed. By all rights, the kunai that should be a long distance behind them. But it was still in front of them. Shit, we can't break out of it. What is this? Kiba lowered his voice, his eyes glancing sharply around their surroundings. Is it the slime mind effect technique? It feels similar to the demon illusion double false surroundings technique too, but it's not either of them. They were a pair who'd been raised under Kurenai, the leading jinjutsu user in Konoha. To be honest, they were confident that their knowledge in jinjutsu was higher than other ninjas. Of course, that included breaking out of them too. But they never heard of a jinjutsu like this. To begin with, if it was a jinjutsu, then it would have been cancelled by now. Which mean it was something different than but similar to a jinjutsu, which would be what? We have no choice, huh? Kiba said, for now, how about we continue with me and Akamaru using the Fong rotating Fong technique? Kiba had found a very simple solution. Rather than following a set course while avoiding bamboo, they just disregard that and cut through in a straight line. Shino silently nodded. Alright, then let's go Akamaru. Kiba looked around. Akamaru? Kiba began restlessly turning his head left and right. Shino searched around his surroundings too, straining his eyes to see past the fog that surrounded them. But no matter how much they searched, despite being right next to them only a moment ago, Akamaru was nowhere to be found. Akamaru had disappeared without a sound or trace. This can't be right, Akamaru. Hey, Akamaru. What is this? Akamaru's smell is gone. Kiba completely lost his head. He leapt through the fog, still yelling. Where are you, Akamaru? Answer me. Akamaru. Wait, Kiba. Calm down. Shino ran after the panicked Kiba. As Kiba ran, calling for Akamaru, the fog grew denser around his figure. He should have been very close by, but Shino couldn't tell thanks to the fog. Shino ran and ran, but he couldn't catch up to Kiba. And soon, Kiba disappeared from his sight, too. Shino, this smell is really strong. Kiba's voice floated towards him from the middle of the fog. You should get what this is now, too. It's the smell of honey, this sweet smell, it's unmistakably. At that moment, all traces of Kiba disappeared completely. Kiba. At that moment, countless numbers of Kakaichu appeared around Shino. He swung up both his arms, countless Kakaichu streaming out of his inner body in all directions. Some went up to the sky, others flooded his surroundings, and his Kakaichu looked almost as thick as the fog. But all the Kakaichu who had been released didn't behave the way Shino expected. They immediately came back to him, reporting that they could find nothing. Can't be, he tried a second time, and a third, but no matter how many times he released them, the same result happened. The Kakaichu went through the crevices between the bamboo that grew around him, but always came right back without finding anything. Watching the insects fly idly about him covered Shino in a cold sweat. His Kakaichu responded to chakra. For them to not be finding anything despite that meant that Kiba, who had been here just a moment ago, had truly and totally disappeared. It wasn't that he just couldn't see him in the thick fog. This is impossible. Shino frantically tried to think. He recalled the last things Kiba had said. He talked about a sweet smell getting stronger, and said that it was the smell of honey. He'd said that Shino should be able to know what it was too, which meant it had been very strong. But, no matter how much Shino strained his senses, he couldn't smell even the faintest scent of sweet honey. However, as he sharpened his senses and concentrated, his efforts bore fruit in another way. Surrounded by the buzzing of his returned insects, Shino became aware of another, different buzzing in the background. He suddenly looked up, and saw several figures flying out of the fog. They were enormous compared to his Kakaichu. Black and yellow in color. Hornets. And they were flying towards him in a straight line, aiming right at Shino. He immediately used his insects to defend himself and mow down the hornets. His swarm of Kakaichu took on the shape of black sword, flying freely through the air. When they did, the hornets' bodies suddenly started melting into a strange viscous liquid. And that liquid started enshrouding the attacking Kakaichu. What is this? This technique. As the liquid wrapped around his Kakaichu, great drops of the thick liquid fell around Shino as well. Honey. The sweet smell of it mixed in with the fog, just like Kiba had said. For the first time since they'd entered, Shino could finally smell it too. In fact, the smell was steadily growing stronger. The hornets made to assault Shino once more. He used his bugs to defend himself again. The bamboo is in the way. If he just had some time, he could smash down the bamboo in a few seconds. The hornets attacked, skillfully flying in and out of the bamboo and using it as a shield at the same time. It was at the moment Shino gave his attention to them that it happened. Right near Shino's feet, the honey that had fallen to the ground began to take on the shape of hornets again. I've done it now, Shino thought as the reformed hornet flew straight towards him on ground level. The hornet's stinger mercilessly stabbed at the back of Shino's neck. His body swayed terribly. This wasn't a normal hornet sting. The hornet's poison had been specially prepared to be strong enough to take out two shinobi at once. The hornet's manipulation of him and their specialized toxic stings, they all pointed to a very skilled insect user. A user of hornets and wasps and bees. The people of Saraku had named that person as the beekeeper. Just as Shino became convinced he knew the true color of the enemy they couldn't see, his body collapsed on the spot. After some time passed, the beekeeper appeared out of the fog without a sound. Step by step, they slowly approached Shino. It was a very strange sight. You couldn't see their face, because it was covered by an umbu mask in the shape of a bee. And it wasn't just their face you couldn't see. Every part of the beekeeper but their masked face was covered in a swarm of honey bees. No, rather, it would be easier for you to picture if it was said that it was almost like the beekeeper's entire body was made of honey bees. This was the beekeeper of Saraku, whose face no one had seen. They slowly stepped forward. Konoha's Aburame clan, they murmured, while looking down at the fallen Shino. Their voices were quiet, but clear. It sounded like a young boy's, but at the same time, like a frail-nerved young man. It also sounded like a calm woman's. It was a mysterious, androgynous voice. Exactly. Shino answered from behind the beekeeper. The Shino that had collapsed onto the floor broke apart and scattered. It had been an insect kagebunshin made of thousands of bugs. To think that you tricked me, the beekeeper said. You're a rare one. The beekeeper didn't have any particular emotions in their voice as they looked around. The insects that had been pretending to be Shino joined the rest of his kakaichu, and in no time at all, the beekeeper was enshrouded in Shino's insects. The honey bees on the beekeeper's boy buzzed and jostled in agitation, sensing their owner was in danger. But why? The beekeeper wondered. The poison. The beekeeper was talking about how Shino should have been stung by the hornets and fallen to their poison. The truth was that Shino had indeed been stung. He had let himself be stung, because he knew that his opponent would never come out into the open if he wasn't down. And that's why Shino willingly let himself take the poison sting. He had enough confidence and faith in himself to do it. I was poisoned, Shino confirmed. But it wasn't a problem. The reason is that this amount of poison won't kill me. Thanks to the insects inside his body, poisons up to a certain level could be neutralized. Shino in particular had studied the small, venomous Renkeichu bugs used by his now-deceased clansman, Aburame Torian, and then raised his own insects to resist poison thanks to that research. That was why it was possible for Shino to neutralize strong poison in mere moments. You could say it was something he'd inherited from Torian, who had been raised alongside him when he was young and been like a sibling to him. Well, I'm well and truly beat. This is my loss, the beekeeper said, realizing they couldn't retaliate. They didn't struggle. You're after my life, I suppose. Well, I'm content to be killed by an insect user of such skill. No, I'm after Honeywine. Shino spoke into the tense silence. I'd like about 2 bottles. Maybe it was because Kiba wasn't around, but the silence suddenly felt too silent. Would you come to my home? The beekeeper asked, turning their masked heads. It turned out the beekeeper was originally a shinobi from Iwagakure, who had settled down to live here peacefully while simultaneously fearing their pursuers would come to find them. In short, Shino had been mistaken for one of the beekeeper's pursuers, and that's why the beekeeper had attacked him. Kiba and Akamaru, Shino said, a dog-loving human and his adored dog, they were here, but what happened to them? Don't worry, they're safe. They're just wandering around in the fog, the beekeeper answered. They were talking as they headed towards the beekeeper's home. Earlier, why did you target me? Because if you don't strike first against an insect user, you'll be in trouble later. I see. They continued quietly conversing in that manner. Shino thought they were having a rather lively conversation. Shino had known of the insect user clan of Iwagakure. It had been a clan of mainly bee users that was now destroyed. The beekeeper was a descendant of that clan. Here it is. The beekeeper came to a stop, and Shino could see a small house appear in the thick fog ahead of them. It was a simple house with a thatched roof. The garden was most likely the breeding area for the bees. There was a basket made of bamboo next to it. The thatched house inconspicuously existed within the bamboo thicket enshrouded with fog. The atmosphere felt like one of those ninja refuges you heard about in stories. Actually, a runaway nin was in fact secretly living here, so a ninja refuge was exactly what it was. While Shino had been looking at the house, the beekeeper had brought honey wine. As he passed it to Shino, the shining, beautiful amber liquid swayed gently inside its container. "Thank you." "How much?" "I don't need money." The beekeeper calmly answered, "It wouldn't be of any use to me even if I had it," so it looked like they'd always been living in this place alone. They seemed to be leading a lifestyle that was completely self-sufficient, without any need for money. Shino let out another short "I see," and put the honey wine in the sack the beekeeper gave, "which reminds me, I'd be very grateful if you could teach me the way out. The fog is really thick, there isn't one." The beekeeper unhesitatingly gave that sort of reply. "What do you mean?" "There isn't a path back, that's what I mean." The beekeeper sat atop a nearby boulder, looking intently at Shino with the eyes behind their mask. "This bamboo grove is a bit like a keka barrier. Once you step in, you can never get out. You'll keep getting lost in the endless fog. That's the kind of jutsu this is. You can't undo the jutsu?" Shino asked. "I'm sorry, but it can't be undone. It's a jutsu I tied to myself." The beekeeper didn't sound very sorry about it. Their voice was as emotionless as it had always been. You could say they were calm, but it was more like their voice was completely flat. "For example, even if you killed me, the jutsu wouldn't come undone," the beekeeper continued, looking up at the sky. "This fog was originally made with unique ingredients that cause humans to become confused and lose their paths. I used just a little bit of that fog's essence to create the jutsu." Shino looked again towards the misty fog. To think there was that sort of ingredient within it, was that really possible? Well, he couldn't say it was impossible. He couldn't feel any hostility from the beekeeper, nor from the honey bees that swarmed them. It didn't look like the beekeeper was lying. And Shino remembered the mysterious story he'd heard from his father, Shibi. Kumagakure was apparently the owner of a mysterious waterfall. It was huge, his father had said, falling down fiercely and giving off huge waves of spray. Apparently, if you faced the falls, your inner self, your true self would be reflected. At the time it had been hard to believe, but there indeed was such a place in the world. In that case, it wasn't too strange if a fog that made humans lose their way existed. It wasn't a genjutsu, but the fog that had been to blame for everything. Shino walked towards the outskirts of the beekeeper's house. A never-ending fog. And never-ending bamboo, bamboo, bamboo. The unchanging scenery continued without end. As an experiment, Shino walked in a straight line, his insects flying around him. He soon found himself arriving at the beekeeper's house once more. He tried again, walking more carefully, only to come back to see the beekeeper still sitting calmly on his boulder. "Thanks to the composition of the fog, even my bugs get lost, is that it?" His bugs couldn't help him. There was no exit. He couldn't find Kiba and Akamaru. He was in a really tight corner. But Shino still kept investigating his surroundings. "I got lost my way in life and found myself here," the beekeeper said, "but that doesn't mean that this is a bad way of life. Rather, I wanted to live like this. Here, there is nothing but the present. There's no past, no future. Just now. I'm living in the present. Don't you think that's more than enough?" The beekeeper's words were calm, slow, and even as he continued sharing his thoughts. "I've always been running. Running from fights, and from the path of a shinobi. From the start, I never thought the shinobi life agreed with me. But I was born and raised into a clan of insect users. I didn't have any other choice but to live as a shinobi, that's why I threw everything away, and ran away to this place. If I have no other path to live but that of a shinobi, then all I have to do is keep getting lost and never go down it." The beekeeper's slowly flowing words disappeared into the pure white fog. Shino silently listened to it all. "All people are lost," the beekeeper said, "not just me. Be it shinobi or merchants, man or woman, everyone. And that includes you. You're lost as well. That's why you're wandering, confused, through the fog like this. He pointed out. You're saying I'm lost. When had Shino's mouth gotten so dry? Shino swallowed and held his breath. And, for some reason, memories of Hinata and Kurenai rose into his mind. He remembered the time he'd spent training with Hinata. He remembered the days of missions he'd done under Kurenai's supervision. He had finally made a friend in Hinata. Kurenai had understood him even though he was quiet. But Hinata was getting married soon. Even now, she was busy preparing for the wedding ceremony. Kurenai was busy raising her child. Now, she was behind a certain line. The two of them had already started down their own paths. And Shino silently watched the side of their two backs. They'd never be able to go back to how Team 8 used to be. Forever. Shino tried to stay calm, but his breathing was getting harsh and labored. The fog was filling up his lungs. Is this what he meant by my being lost? Hinata and Kurenai, and everyone, they were heading down their own paths, but Shino was the only one left behind where he began. That was the feeling he'd fallen into. He wasn't heading towards any place, and he wasn't settling down anywhere. He felt like he was like the wavering fog, always being the only thing that was left behind. Were those feelings a deception created by a fog? No, that wasn't it. He'd always felt like this. After they came to this place, and before as well. He had always kept feeling lost. And the thought had occurred to him. From some tiny corner of his heart. He hadn't even noticed it himself, but he thought. I want to go back to those days. He wanted to go back, just one more time, back to those days when everyone had stuck together as Team 8. You hadn't even noticed that you felt lost, had you? The beekeeper said, looking at Shino. Shino was standing stock still in place. He couldn't move a single step forwards. No matter how much he tried to move forward, he wouldn't be able to reach the exit anyway, so why bother? He couldn't even see anything in front of him anyway, thanks to the fog. You don't have to keep pushing yourself forwards. The beekeeper said. You can just leave everything and live here, and it'll be fine. The fog, along with the beekeeper's kind words, pierced through Shino. That might just be best. Shino thought. If he couldn't move forwards, and if nothing was waiting for him even if he did move forwards, then he wanted to just stay here and live his days without changing anything. That could very well become his happiness. The beekeeper held out a hand. The honeybees that surrounded their arm drew away to reveal a milky white hand. If you want, the beekeeper said, then you could stay here with me. Shino looked at the offered hand. And then, suddenly, it's Team 8's last mission. Let's go, you guys. He suddenly remembered Kiba's words. That battle cry of his resounded inside Shino's mind. That's right, this is Team 8's last mission. In that instant, it felt like the darkness around Shino's field of vision disappeared completely. His dazed mind became crisp and clear. For some reason or another, the fog around his surroundings had drawn back. I can't just stop in a place like this. I have to hurry and go back to the village. The reason is that I absolutely have to attend a precious friend's wedding ceremony. Beneath his sunglasses, Shino's eyes were resolute as he looked firmly ahead. That moment, he suddenly noticed a nearby bamboo pole with a kunai embedded in it. It was unmistakably the kunai that Kiba had thrown into a bamboo pole near the town. He hadn't noticed it at all until now. And the fact that it was here meant that. Shino turned his head, and sure enough, he could see the entrance to the bamboo grove ahead of him. His eyes could even make out the states of the traveler's guardian deities. It was definitely the place that Shino and the rest had entered. The entrance, no, the exit is there, he said to the beekeeper, pointing. I don't see anything, there's nothing but fog. The beekeeper tilted their head to one side. The tone of their voice sounded like they genuinely couldn't see the exit. And Shino finally understood the situation. It was a pretty simple thing. The fog made humans lose their way. The jutsu used the fog. People lost the paths of their lives inside the fog. Here, there wasn't any present or future. That's why there was nothing but an eternal present inside the fog. That's what it was. But that was only the case if you were running away from your past and had thrown away your future. Just like the beekeeper had said, no matter how much someone trained as a shinobi, no matter how many years they had lived, anyone who lived life had times when they felt lost. But for those who didn't give up and kept moving forward and believing in the future, this fog didn't have any power at all. If you firmly, steadily, built up hope and belief in yourself and your heart while walking forwards, then even if you did get caught in the middle of a thick fog, you would eventually find your way out. Shino gave a wry smile. He couldn't help but think that in a way, the fog was very similar to life. I see, so you saw the road ahead with the traveler's guardian deity. The beekeeper hung their head. They quietly murmured, "It's best that you go quickly then. Before you lose the path again." As usual, the beekeeper's tone was even and without emotion. But something about them seemed lonely as they sat on that large boulder. Or maybe Shino was overthinking things. No, that wasn't it. The fog wrapped around them, the never-ending bamboo thickets, the small house without people, the honey bees that surrounded the beekeeper, the umbu mask they wore and hid their face with. Every single one of those things was like another barrier to the beekeeper. Shino understood that very well. The reason he understood was that Shino hid himself too, in his long coat and hood. This is a shield to protect myself. Not physically, but emotionally. Shino understood those sorts of feelings so much it hurt. That's why he wavered over whether he should step over the boundaries of a person's barrier. People got lost over even things like this. But if he just left the beekeeper behind in this thick fog, he wouldn't be a shinobi. The beekeeper was a fellow shinobi who'd also been born into an insect user clan. If Shino held himself back by thinking he was overstepping his boundaries or meddling in someone else's business, and just turned his back on them and left, then he knew he was definitely going to regret it. At times like this, rather than regretting what you didn't try, it was better to try your luck and see. The reason for that is, you said you're living in the present. Shino said, but I can't help but wonder if that isn't the wrong choice. The reason that is that it's what Naruto would do. Can a person really live in the present when they're running away from everything? Shino asked. Someone who's constantly dragged down by their past and unable to see their future, are they really living in the present? Today will one day be in the past, and someone who lives eternally in that present will never be able to see their future, will they? At least, that's what I think. Shino shifted the sack on his back full of honey wine that the beekeeper had given. Until now, he'd never resented himself for being bad at words. When he was lost in the fog, he really had thought that he'd be able to live idly day by day. You're really a gem, the beekeeper finally spoke after listening to Shino's lecture. Really unexpected. I thought you were a really quiet man, but it turns out that while you may not show it in your words or your facial expressions, you're quite passionate on the inside. I feel like I just got lectured by an eager teacher. The beekeeper was calmly speaking. Their tone was as even as it always was, and thanks to their mask, Shino couldn't see the look on their face. However, he felt like the beekeeper was definitely giving a wry smile. A teacher, huh? I've never really thought about that, but my partner is a problem child after all, Shino replied, the faces of his comrades coming to mind. Lots of my classmates were problem children. A constant complainer, a huge glutton, a young prankster, the one who behaved properly was always me. But still, every one of those classmates have now become splendid adults. They lived eagerly in the present without running away, and that's why they could arrive at this future. Shino paused and gestured towards the sack of honey wine he carried. Thank you for this. I'll be going now. What are you going to do about that dog-loving child? The beekeeper asked from behind him. What if, unlike you, he doesn't make his way out? Shino didn't even have to think about his reply to that question. That one's far more honest than I am. Shino said. He won't lose his way. Full of conviction, Shino turned towards the exit and started walking. When Shino came out of the fog, the wide, blue sky greeted him. He put his hands in the pockets of his coat and waited in front of the traveler's guardian deity. A line of ants were marching near his foot, and he watched them to pass the time. After a while, he heard a voice from the midst of the bamboo thicket. Yahoo! We finally found the exit, Akamaru. The voice was immediately followed by a very familiar sounding bark. Kiba leapt out of the bamboo grove, covered in mud. You're late, Shino called out, when a mud-covered Kiba leapt out. Kiba. Kiba jumped back in surprise when he saw Shino suddenly standing beside him. I know it's you by the smell, but you could at least give some warning before you suddenly make an appearance. Kiba pulled out a hand towel to wipe off the mud on his face, grumbling about how Shino's abrupt appearance had almost given him a heart attack. You look like you went through some hardships, Shino noted. I did not. Everything was fine. Kiba was someone who liked to act tough. He was easy to understand. He must have gotten lost too, in his own way. Just like Shino, Kiba had probably faced his worries and anxieties for the future, too, in that genjutsu-like bamboo grove. But Kiba had still made it here. What in the world had Kiba been worried about? What kind of a future was he going towards? Shino felt a little curious, so he wanted to prod for answers. Are you going to confess to that woman? Kiba's face had turned scarlet at the sudden question. What ? What is this? Why is it that you're even bothering me about Tamaki? Even me, Kiba really was an incredibly easy to understand man. But that was one of his good points. Listen, you're totally wrong. You know, Shino, you really don't get it. It's probably because you're not super popular. Listen, a man can't be too greedy. Kiba was trying to play it cool as much as possible, but his face was still red. Then, what should a man do? Well, the first step is obviously, you know, that thing. Kiba was flustered, cold sweat dripping down his forehead. Yeah, letters. Exchanging letters seems like the best place to start, right? Seems like. No, it definitely is. Popular guys start out things like that. By exchanging letters. Right, Akamaru? Kiba must have been very flustered, appealing to Akamaru for help. Akamaru averted his eyes. Anyway, more importantly, we've got to go and find that honey wine. Kiba changed the subject. The sun's gonna set soon. I've already gotten some. Shino said, so let's go home. You're kidding, right? I didn't even get to do anything. Shino gave the astonished Kiba one backwards glance before starting the walk back. Akamaru looked up at Kiba, who'd frozen stiff in shock, gave one bark, and briskly followed Shino. Well, wait just a minute. Kiba followed after them, full of complaints. Good grief, first Naruto, now you, why is it that you guys always get the good parts? I did a lot of work inside that fog too, you know. It looked like the only one who knew what Kiba had gone through in the fog was Akamaru. Akamaru himself seemed to be keeping his lips sealed, so he probably wasn't going to go talking about it. Shino was thinking about that as he walked, when, hey, Shino, look at that. Kiba yelled. Wondering what he was yelling about, Shino turned his head to look back in. The fog surrounding the bamboo grove had lifted. In full sight, the bamboo grove wasn't all that wide at all. Just normal-sized, like any other bamboo thicket. Shit, what is this? Why is it just clearing up now? I got so lost in there. Kiba had apparently forgotten about how he bluffed that everything had been fine inside the bamboo grove, complaining openly now. So he had gotten lost in his own way. But Kiba didn't know the true meaning of that fog. The fact that the fog had lifted so completely meant. I see, so you work things out, Shino murmured to himself. In that moment, Kiba glanced at Shino's face. What he saw made his eyes go wide. Shino, this is rare. You hardly ever smile like that, Ichim. What are you talking about, Kiba? Huh? Kiba started blinking. Was I seeing things? That's strange. Shino turned his back on him and kept walking. We have to hurry up. The reason is that Kurenai-sensei is waiting for us. The atmosphere felt refreshing. The sky was clear, and the fog was gone. Kiba hurried to catch up to Shino, and then squinted his eyes as he looked up at the sun to tell how much time had passed based on its angle. Yeah, I really wanted to find a wedding present before anyone else did. He muttered. Seriously. We ended up whiling away so many hours, but then hey, our wedding present is definitely the best one. Obviously. You, me, and Akamaru all achieved this gift by working together, after all. After a while, the old buildings of the abandoned town started to come into sight again. There weren't as many cats in the area now. As expected, the cats had shown up to keep an eye on them. They probably decided Shino and the rest weren't a threat and gone back now. That, or they'd seen them walking with Tamaki and Momo, and decided they approved of their presence. Somehow, it felt like the abandoned town itself had given them its seal of approval. As they entered a complicated-looking alleyway, Shino took out one insect. Just in case, he told this one insect to memorize the complicated journey back. Kiba saw the insect and immediately understood, letting out a whistle. You're really sensible, he said, thanks. If we follow it, we'll head to the exit soon. They followed the insect as it flew through the roads without hesitating once. And with this, Shino murmured, teammate's last mission is complete. For some reason, he wanted to say the words himself. He didn't want to hear them from someone else. He wanted to hear them come out from his own mouth. Of course, if he did that, the self-declared leader of Team 8 aka Kiba wasn't going to let it slide. Why are you the one who's declaring that? And you know, the mission isn't going to be finished until we head back to the village. Of course. Shino obediently nodded, continuing to think about what he'd been considering earlier, would go back to the village and make sure to ascertain the beginning of Naruto and Hinata's future with our own eyes. Him? What's this? You've turned into a real poet today. Have I? They kept talking as they walked. Shino remembered the day he'd first been put on the same team as Kiba. I don't think I'll be able to get along with you well. The reason is that Kiba hadn't let him finish that sentence. Back then, he'd been filled with nothing but anxiety about the future. Every day, he'd felt depressed about it. But, look at how things turned out. Right now, Shino had a partner he trusted more than anyone else walking beside him. He had a best friend who listened to what he had to say. If he was able to tell his past self about how things would turn out, what kind of an expression would his younger self make? He'd probably think the future wasn't all that bad after all. But, there was one thing Shino clearly knew, the present isn't all that bad. Even if he walked on a different path on the future, the memories of this time wouldn't disappear. And when it came to what lay beyond his memories, when it came to the future that lay ahead of this present contentness, Shino had nothing to be afraid of. The reason was, Shino suddenly remembered something and turned to ask Kiba. That being said, Kiba, you said you were being considered a candidate, but when exactly will your Hokage inauguration ceremony take place? S.H. Shut up. I'll work hard so it happens. The reason was, these bonds. His bonds with his comrades were for life. Epilogue. Perfect weather for a wedding. The weather was very clear today. Under the watchful eyes of the past Hokage carved into the mountain, many people gathered in the center of the village. Everyone was in formal attire, their clothes a little more adult-like than usual. Kakashi hectically rushed around as he took care of every possible factor, from readying the venue to checking on security measures. After all, the people attending included Gaara the Kazekage as all the Kage from the other villages, Kumagakure as Killer Bee, and more. Yamato was moving around in a frenzy too, acting under the supervision of Kakashi, who was handing out instructions while getting advice from the previous Hokage, Tsunade. Kakashi had asked Yamato for a few favors. But somehow, before Yamato could notice what was happening, he ended up being burdened with many tiresome tasks. Kakashi had said, "I'll be relying on you," with a smile, though, so Yamato didn't have any harsh feelings. Rather, Yamato, whose facial expression was usually so unchanging along with his mellow character, was in excessively good spirits, carrying out his chores with a content smile. He had that look on his face because Kakashi was a senpai Yamato respected from the bottom of his heart. Lee and Guy showed up with dumbbells in tow, and threw everyone around them into a great shock. They're even training on a day like this, everyone thought, half scandalized. Nobody knew yet that they hadn't brought the dumbbells so they could train with them. Tenten was acting like she was both the hot-blooded men's guardian, scolding them on how to behave while doing this or that. She was muttering complaints like she was burdened with looking after them, but deep down in her heart, she was having fun. Shikamaru was talking to Tamari about something. It appeared to be a complicated discussion about work, but both of their faces were bright and cheerful, and every now and then, their laughter would mix together in the air. They were smiling naturally, spontaneously, and seeing them stand side by side didn't feel out of place at all. They were a well-matched couple. As he watched the two of them, Choji smiled as well. While he was thinking he didn't want to disturb the nice mood those two had, he was also preoccupied with something else inside his head. Choji was looking for a solution to solve his dilemma, how he was going to manage to eat every single one of the many dishes laid out in the venue. He thought that he would need a secret plan, something like what Shikamaru would cook up, but no matter how much he thought, no amazing strategies occurred to him. Choji settled on the idea that he'd just start from one side of the banquet and go all the way to the other. After coming to this conclusion, he gave another smile. Speaking of nice moods, Ino and Sai were like that too. They'd entered the venue holding hands. Even while everyone around teased them, all things are heating up, the two looked blissfully happy. Nearby them, Kiba had been constantly asking Kurenai questions for a while now. Kiba had burst into the venue triumphantly holding up honey wine, boasting about how we've brought something for Naruto from the history of the Senju clan. But it looked like Kiba's actual knowledge of history was vague, and now he was bothering Kurenai with constant questions about it. It seemed like Kurenai had finally decided to give him an impromptu history lesson. Kiba listened intently as she talked, noting things down on a memo pad, probably so he could use the info properly later. Nearby, Mirai was all dressed up and riding on top of Akamaru, playing around. Shino was watching, wondering if it still counted as playing horsey if in fact you were riding a dog. Then, while looking at Akamaru and Kiba, Shino wondered when it would be best to give Naruto and Hinata the honey wine. It was their trump card, so perhaps it should be saved for last. Or maybe it should be given first. It was something to be concerned about. The reason was, Shino kept worrying silently in his head over the matter. One by one, the venue was slowly filling up with more and more friendly and familiar faces. Ichiraku Ramen's owner Tucci came, as well as his daughter Ayam, who was an attraction for guests to come to the ramen store. Iriko was already being overwhelmed with emotion from the moment he stepped inside. The weather was very clear today. Sakura looked up at the sky, alone. As she did so, she thought about a certain someone who was under the same sky, continuing his travels even now. Just thinking that made her insides feel as bright and clear as the sky above her. She had someone she was sending her thoughts to. Just that was enough to make her feel blissful. It was a beautiful day, as if the heavens themselves were giving their blessing. And, of course, Hyuga Hinata's thoughts had wandered over to a place beyond the sky again. Neji and Aya-san. Glancing out the waiting room's window, she could see the blue sky free of any clouds. "I'm getting married." She whispered those words inside her heart, and turned to look at the young man standing next to her. Looking at the intense look on his face, her heart started thudding despite herself. Even though she'd always been looking at him, just being with him like this made her pulse rate pick up like it had the very first day she'd met him. Naruto's unflinching eyes were looking at the Hokage monument, the faces of previous Hokage carved into rock. Or rather, to be more accurate, he was looking at the carved face of Namika's Minato, his dad. Just looking at him as he did that, Hinata felt so full of emotion, her chest could burst. Ah, she thought. Right now, this second. Standing next to the person she loved like this made her feel unbearably happy. She was so happy, she couldn't even hope to express it with words. This moment is bliss. Hinata thought, simply, honestly. As she did, maybe he noticed she was looking because his eyes turned to meet hers. Hinata's face turned red. She ended up fidgeting a little. He gave her an embarrassed grin too. The serious look on his face turned into another one, innocent like a young boy. She adored every single one of his facial expressions. Her father Hayashi and little sister Hanabi entered the waiting room. It was almost time. Hinata took Naruto's arm and held on tight. Uzumaki Naruto and Hyuga Hinata. Their wedding ceremony now begins. End of Chapter 8. Thank you for listening. Remember to like and subscribe for lots more.